Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second video. Today, we're going to be talking about the second part of our Congress presentation. So I can pull up my slideshow real quick here. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the process about how a bill or a resolution in Congress actually becomes a law. Right. So the first thing to talk about, and I should say, the file is in Canvas. If you guys want to follow along with what I'm going through here, I'm picking up on the slide that says committee system. Okay, so even though a lot of what we see about Congress happens on the floor of the House or the Senate where they're debating, the vast majority of the work goes on in committees, right? There are certain committees that there are both standing committees that exist from Congress to Congress, and there are also temporary or ad hoc committees that come up as issues are needed, right? But that's where the vast majority of the debate on bills and resolutions is going to happen. So there's some standing committees, right? Some examples of them are, for example, the Ways and Means Committee in the House is extremely important. It's the key financial committee. The similar one in the Senate is the Senate Finance Committee, the Armed Services Committee, both in the House and the Senate, right, regarding the military, foreign affairs, select committees. So, for example, when the Judicial Committee, the House Judicial Committee was investigating President Trump and his dealings with Russia, for example, that could be a select committee. There are also joint committees, right, between the two houses, right, between the House and the Senate, right. So there are joint committees that focus on the economy, that focus on taxes, etc. And then finally, we'll talk about this a little bit more once we get to how a bill becomes a law, but there are conference committees where, let's say, the House passes a particular bill and the Senate passes a bill, and then they have to, in order for it to be sent to the president to get approval, both the House and the Senate have to get together and they have to reconcile the differences between the two bills. The staff system is also worth mentioning briefly. And when we're talking about Congress, there are, let's see, so there are 535 people in Congress and they have almost 15,000 staffers, right? So you can imagine a vast majority of the work that's being done in Congress is being done by staffers who are doing research on particular issues, and they're corresponding to, citizens who have a particular interest in an issue, doing really any and everything you can imagine. Doing all the behind the scenes work, right? So they have ideas for policies, they draft legislation, they organize meetings, they negotiate. All right, so it takes a ton of steps for something to actually become a law, right? So now a bill, the idea for a bill, which is sort of the idea of a law before it becomes a law, can come from anybody. It could come from a president, it could come from a citizen, it could come from somebody working in the bureaucracy, but it has to be introduced on the floor either by a member of the House or a member of the Senate. If you're looking to see, the status on a particular bill, here's how you'll see it. So if the House, you're going to see the initials HR, and then whatever the bill number is, and for the Senate, you'll see the S and the bill number. Only the House can propose bills related to money, spending, or raising. The reason for that being that the House of Representatives is supposed to be the one that is the closest to the people, right? So we want to make sure that we're keeping the people as close to the center of government as possible. So here we go. We'll walk through the steps. Step one, the bill is submitted officially to the clerk of the House or the Senate. They have this thing called the hopper, right, which is like a little metal basket where somebody who wants to propose a bill can drop that in the hopper of the House and the Senate. Then the clerk is going to send that to the presiding officer, right? So the presiding officer in the House is the Speaker of the House. The presiding officer in the Senate is going to be the Senate Majority Leader. And then they're going to look at that bill and see, whichever committee it's most appropriate for, and they'll send it to that committee. right? Once it goes to that committee, those committees also have subcommittees, right? So the committee chair will send that bill to the appropriate subcommittee. About 90% of bills die in committee, right? So a lot of them, a lot of them even die in subcommittees, right? So it could be the case that the committee chair, when they first get it, see it and say this is not going to work, and they don't even refer it to a subcommittee. It just dies. It could be referred to the subcommittee. They do some research into it and find out it's not legit. If it's the case that the subcommittee votes on it and passes it, and the committee votes on it and passes it, it goes to the Rules Committee, right? Which the Rules Committee looks at the bill, makes sure it follows all the proper procedures, and then starts to set the rules for the debate on the floor, right? So after it comes out of committee, it will go to the entire House or the entire Senate for debate. There are some differences between the House and the Senate. In the House, the debate is just between the chief sponsor of the bill, right, usually coming out of the committee, and the primary opponent to that bill. So it's essentially a debate between two. In the Senate, the debate is unlimited. The debate, is going to be open to everybody on the Senate floor. Where this is also where the notion of the filibuster comes in, right? So the filibuster can be the case when if a particular senator does not want a particular bill to pass, but they think that there's a good chance that it might pass if it goes to a vote, they essentially try to run out the clock, right? Because there's a certain time limit placed by the Rules Committee on debate, right? And if a vote is not taken by the time that debate is up, then the bill dies, right? So essentially, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that a senator has to have their debate limited, so they can talk on the issue for as long as they want. And once they have control of the floor, they don't even have to necessarily talk about the issue. There have been cases where people would get the phone book, read the phone book. They would get books, read books, anything they can to run out the clock. The longest filibuster, I believe, has been about 22 hours. So somebody has spoke continuously for 22 hours. There's a way to stop a filibuster. It's called the vote of cloture, right? But that requires 60% of senators to vote that way, which can be very difficult to achieve. So after the debate on the floor, if it looks like the bill is going to pass, the presiding officer will schedule the bill for a vote. By that point, typically it's a foregone conclusion what's going to happen. Then it has to happen in the other house as well, right? So for Congress to actually create a law, it has to be passed in both the House and the Senate. So they have to go through the exact same procedures in the other chamber, whichever one that wasn't. Then, as I mentioned earlier, it has to go to the conference committee where they work out the differences. Then, finally, it goes to the president, right? So the president can choose to either approve it or veto it. And there are three ways that this can work, right? If it's approved, the president can sign it, right? Or if Congress is in session and he doesn't sign it within 10 days, it becomes a law, right? If he vetoes it, he just sends the bill back unsigned, right? And it's vetoed. And then there's also something called the pocket veto, right? And the pocket veto, essentially, it goes back to the 10-day proviso, right? If Congress is not in session and the president does not sign it and just keeps control of it, then it's vetoed, right? And that's called a pocket veto. Real quickly, some other types of legislation outside of bills. There are joint resolutions, right? It requires approval of both chambers. It's very similar to a law. Oftentimes, these are used for continuing resolutions, a bill that's already been, or a law that's already been passed, if it has a certain time limit on it, and they want that to continue coming, they can do it as a joint resolution. That's also subject to presidential approval or veto. There are concurrent resolutions, which have to be passed by both chambers, right? But it doesn't require presidential approval. And essentially, they just relate to internal matters within Congress. It doesn't go any farther than Congress. And then there are simple resolutions, which are similar to concurrent resolutions, but they only refer to either the House or the Senate. what are some of the ways that Congress makes their decision whether to approve a bill or not? Right? We talked about the process. Obviously, their constituents play a big part. They're going to have to be elected again. So if it's the case that their constituents don't support a particular bill, then most likely that representative will not support it. Interest groups can play a big part in it, especially remember we were talking about sort of that iron triangle, right, and how the interest groups work to get their people into office. Party lines, oftentimes these votes will be on party line. It's becoming more and more prevalent. What are some other tasks that Congress carries out besides passing laws? They have oversight, right, over the intelligence community, for example. Because Congress creates the agencies and departments that are within the government, right, that the executive branch manages. So the Department of Homeland Security, for example, was created by Congress after 9/11. So because they create these bodies, they also have the oversight function to make sure that they're carrying out their mission. Advice and consent, right? So this was given to the Senate on treaties, on the appointment of judges, right? Secretaries, leaders of departments and agencies, ambassadors. And then finally, the one we've heard a lot about recently, Congress has the power of impeachment and removal for matters of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay, I'll see you guys on Friday. Don't forget to take the quiz.